So, John, thanks for joining us tonight. I know it's already 9 o'clock there, so we really appreciate you being on. Like I told you, we're going to do a little bit of an interview. We're going to basically do like an hour and ask you some questions, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for everybody. And I would ask you in the audience, if you can, being that this is new, we're doing it on Zoom. Remember when we used to do exchangers, how sensitive the mic is? That's the mic that's still picking up all of this, okay? So people come in, I'd ask you to keep down the chit-chat until we're done, okay? If you need to go to the restroom or get some food in the back, just try not to be super loud about it, okay? So, John, what time is it there, 9?
I'm right here, ready to go.
So, I saw you, I got the chance to see you in 2020. You were the first thing I did after they let us travel again. Came out and saw you and Pete doing your thing, so that was awesome. I'm going to throw you some easy questions now, for the beginning. When did you get into, what made you get into real estate? I don't know if I've ever heard you talk.
Well, I was as a young man, I was doing a number of different jobs off and on, like a lot of people. I started off by delivering newspapers, but then when I was old enough to get a job, I'd work in kitchens and worked my way up to bartender and assistant manager, worked in the restaurant business for a couple of years going through school. But that was hard work and it didn't pay well. So one summer I got lucky. I had a job that I was doing work around a new development, and the guy who was selling the lots in that development had to watch his office for an hour, so I did. And somebody came in and they bought a lot while I was there, and the guy gave me $100 tip to sell that lot. Well, I was making $60 a week, so $100 tip really got my attention. And, I decided maybe I was doing the wrong thing, So I started studying real estate all the way through college. I studied real estate. I got a job managing an apartment building while I was at university. And when I got out, the fellow who owned the apartment building wanted to sell it, so I sold it for him. Made a nice commission. This is back when I was just getting out of college. So I took that money and I learned how to fly, and got a job. I had my real estate license, so I started selling things. And then I started buying things back in the early 70s. And I got hooked on buying. I just found that was a better niche for me. I had more control. I don't know how many agents you have in your group, but agents, if they were like me, felt like they didn't have much control. I would find a really good deal for somebody and they wouldn't buy it. But I pretty soon found out a way to close that deal, because when somebody hired me to find them a good deal and I found it, and they said, well, that's not exactly what we wanted, I'd say, well, you don't mind if I buy it then, do you? And that would really slow them down. Think about it. and I actually did buy several things because people wouldn't buy them. I said, okay, it's a good deal. If you don't want it, I'll take it. So I became a buyer, and I learned how to manage, and I enjoy management. I've converted myself from an apartment building guy. I used to have apartment buildings and duplexes and commercial. I had a motel and a strip center and a restaurant, had all sorts of stuff, wine shop. I had a car wash. So I bought a lot of things that I wish I hadn't bought, actually, because it took a lot of my time. And I converted from that into buying houses as investments back, and started teaching about it back in the early 70s, and been teaching about it ever since and written books on it. And it's been very, very good to me. We live in a very nice house in a very nice part of town, and always have. And so I encourage people to do what we've done, and it's not complicated. A lot of common sense involved. So I'm happy to share some of that tonight. And when I come to teach for you for 2 days, I'm looking forward to that. I counted up today. I've been to California over 70 times. So it's kind of my second home. I've owned property in California. I know your area really well. Your prices are not way different than mine. My typical house is about $500,000, rents for $3,000 a month. So that's not way off of your numbers, depending on what part of town you're looking at. And I've looked at several houses for sale out there, Riverside, San Bernardino, and they look a lot like my houses. So the math works. My most successful students are from Southern California, because they started buying houses back when I told them to, and they've been buying ever since. And of course, if you've been buying houses for 20 or 30 years in Southern California, you look pretty smart today.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to continue. I don't think California is going to fall into the water. everything changes. And what I encourage people to do is not to watch the news too much, you know, because people watch the news, they get all excited about something every day. And, you know, it's generally not anything that's ever going to make you any money. Uh, you know, the optimists in this world have always made the money, not the pessimists. So if you're a, you know, glass half full person, you have a uphill battle when it comes to investing of any kind, because you don't believe that investing is going to be a good thing for you. But I can tell you with years of experience that investing is a wonderful thing to do. It provides a terrific lifestyle for your family and for other people that you help invest. You know, you should help your family invest. I've done that, and help your friends invest. And that's why I teach, is to make friends and help them invest and do it well, and buy things that make them a lot of money over a period of time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it seems your blueprint, your strategy, you know, the name of your book, it seems so simple. Building wealth one house at a time. Like, how do people keep messing that up? Like in your opinion,
Sorry, Rich, I can't hear you very well. I'm getting some feedback on your end there.
So, like, you know, your book, you're building wealth one house at a time. Can you hear me better?
I'll try to hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so where do people like? It seems like such a simple strategy that people don't stick to, or they don't listen, or they mess it up. Like, why is that?
Yeah, well, it is a simple strategy. You know, I decided to buy houses rather than multi-tenant buildings for a couple reasons. But for the primary reason is management. I didn't want to manage, you know, I didn't want to break up fights anymore. Even with a duplex, the people all fight with each other. But if you have a 10 or 20 unit building, there's a fight going on every day. And so you're a babysitter, and it's just a lot more work. Now, you know, I got lured into the apartment building business and the motel business because I saw more cash flow on a daily basis there, and that's true. But you work for it. You're trading your time for that cash flow, because it takes some time to manage those buildings. And what I learned was, by buying houses, it took a lot less of my time to manage properties. So I had more time to look for properties that I could buy at bargain prices. And that pays so much better than management. You know, you can hire a manager, but it's pretty hard to hire somebody that's really good at buying for you, that'll go out and find a deal that they can buy at a good price on good terms and it's the right property. I mean, I'm not sure you can find those folks. So if you can spend less of your time managing property and more of your time putting together deals and buying other property and making terrific deals on financing, you just make more money in the long run. So, and you know, houses are a lot, for most people that I talk to, they already have something they're doing. You know, they have a business or they have a job, or maybe they're flipping houses. They're already pretty busy. So I think it's important, and my strategy has always been to try to keep your investment side as simple as possible, you know, as few moving parts as possible. At one time, I had a goal of buying 100 houses, and as I got fairly close to that goal, I woke up one morning and I asked myself, why? Why 100? You know, what's magic about owning 100 houses? It's a good story, but it's a lot of work. So we went the other way. We shrunk our portfolio. We own a third as many properties today as we used to. They're better properties. They're in better locations. They're more valuable. The cash flow it would be less with the properties I have today than if I kept all those properties. But I'm working a lot less too. So I'd rather make my money long term than I would short term. Short term money, and I have a lot of rent. You know, we own a number of properties and we collect rent every month, and we like that rent. But what I found is we spend the rent. You know, when the rent comes in, we spend it. And in the beginning, you use it to pay your mortgage payments and to pay your taxes, insurance, and maintenance. But once you get all your houses paid off, like we have, you just have income and you just spend the money. Well, if you spend all the money that comes in, it doesn't accumulate. So if you're going to end up with some wealth one day, you have to have a system to let you accumulate wealth, accumulate money, not just spend it every month. And that's what owning houses long term does for you. I encourage people to own properties and hold on to them until they at least double in value. And if you have that mindset that you're going to buy something and hold on to it till at least doubles in value, then you're picky about what you buy. You know, you're not going to buy something that's going to drive you crazy from a management standpoint. You know, you're not going to buy something like a rooming house that has 30 people living there and they move out in and out every week. They'll just drive you crazy. So by buying a house, average tenant stays more than 10 years. I've had people stay with me more than 30 years, which sounds crazy, but they do. They like where they live. It's kind of like they own that house because they certainly have paid for that house. They paid off the mortgage and they're still making payments. And and I raise my rents every year. It's not like we leave the rent the same for 30 years. The rents keep going up. So the houses that are worth $500,000 today rent for $3,000 a month. Those houses used to be worth, I thought, $100,000. I used to rent for $500 a month. So all the numbers change over a period of time. And some of it's inflation and some of it's demand and supply. So you have to know your markets and you have to study this. It's not it's not a simple thing because neighborhoods change, real estate markets change, tax laws change, interest rates change. It's a game where there's a lot of moving parts, and that makes it fun. And the folks who study it and really pay attention to market trends in their neighborhoods, and they know what property values are worth, and they know what rents are, and they know which way they're going. Well, they can see these trends, and when you see a trend, you know when the best time to buy is and when the best time to sell is. So
Is that strategy or like has that strategy changed over the years or evolved, like depending on like a mindset shift, did things change in your life that maybe change your plan along the way? Or?
Well, certainly you change over the years. You get smarter. Hopefully, you get wiser. You learn more about the business. You end up with more net worth. You have more cash flow. So your priorities change, and the type of property that you buy changes. I mean, for me to buy today, it has to be not just a terrific price, but it has to be a terrific neighborhood. I'm not going to buy anything that's not in a Class A neighborhood, and the rents are not as important to me as they once were. I want some rent, but I'm not looking for most of my income from rents. I'm looking for most of my income from either a discounted price, great terms on the loan, or appreciation over a period of time. But when you first start out, I mean, some of the first houses I was looking in the San Bernardino and Riverside markets today, I was looking at a lot of houses for sale. And I see the houses that I used to buy, and I see the houses that I own now, and they're different prices. You can still buy a house for a lot less money if you're put up with a small house, but you get a different tenant in that small house probably on a rougher street, not as good a school district, that type of thing. So you kind of started working whatever you can afford to buy, and the more you know. And this is an important point, I think. If you'll study every deal that you make, when you buy something and close on it, the next couple of days you should stop and think for an hour or so and say, okay, what did I do right and what did I do wrong in this transaction? Could I negotiate it differently and come up with maybe a better price or better terms? So you analyze the deal, and then the next time you make an offer, the next time you buy a property, you try to improve on that. So it's not a cookie cutter thing where you do the same thing over and over and over again. That would be a mistake. You want to make every deal that you make down the road a little bit better than the last one you made. And of course, as you point out, over time, you change the way you see things, because one day you wake up and you own a bunch of houses and you really don't want any more. Well, you're going to make your best deals when you don't want any more. I can tell you that. So, when you first started, you really want a house. So you go out there and you buy whatever you can buy. And the first house I bought, I still remember the first house I bought, and I remember it because I still own it. And but it was not a great deal, and it was a retail price. It was a 20% down payment. It was back then. It was a 7% loan, which sounds about normal today, but it wasn't a great deal back then. But I still owned that house, and it had a 20-year loan on it, payable to the seller, and that loan is paid off now. And so for the last 25 years or so, I've been collecting rental on a free and clear house. And I tell people, and this is pretty interesting, that one house has made me more money than everything else I've ever done in business. Okay, my other investments, but in business. So the speaking I've done, the books I've sold, that kind of stuff, the business income, that one house has made me more money than all the other income put together. And that's something you to think about. That's pretty profound. You can buy one house and make more money off that one house than you'll make working the rest of your life.
Yeah, I like that. And what would you say to people, we're talking about prices and you're looking at San Bernardino, obviously they're more expensive than they were, but I read the Monopoly game a couple of years ago now. And one of the things that stood out to me was like people in the 70s were complaining about how expensive California was and that they couldn't wait to get out and they'd try and buy property in other states. If people still have that feeling, that kind of mindset that things are too expensive here in California, like what would you tell them?
Well, when I first got into California, which was back in the early 70s, you could buy a pretty nice house for about $40,000. That's to be 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a double-car garage in Garden Grove. $40,000. It's hard to believe that today if you're just getting into business. And that house today is probably worth $1 million, round figures. So the houses back then, people struggled to buy, just like they struggle to buy today. And if you look around, more people are renting than ever before because the cost of buying a house has gone up if you pay retail for the house and if you pay retail for the money and and do all the other things that most buyers do. But there's another way. You don't have to pay retail for the house. You don't have to pay retail for the money. And if you're just starting in an expensive market, maybe you can't afford to buy a whole house. One of the first properties I bought was a duplex, and I bought it with a friend of mine, and he lived upstairs, and I lived downstairs. And we pooled our money for the down payment, and we had the seller carry back the financing. We didn't have to go to a bank to get a loan. The seller carried the financing. But we lived in that duplex for a number of years, and then when we moved out, we rented it for a number of years. So there's ways to get into a property. If you can't afford to buy a whole house and you're just getting started, maybe you can buy half of a duplex, or maybe you can buy half of a duplex and bring a roommate in to pay half the payment. I mean, what you do is you figure out how to make it work with what you have today. And most people, I mean, probably 95% of the people that buy real estate just do it the same way they always did. They go down to the bank and get a loan. So they pay retail closing costs, they pay retail interest rates, they get a loan that's really not very friendly because if you have a problem, the banks aren't going to negotiate with you. They're going to just try to take your house away from you. So they do a lot of things wrong. And if you learn how to do it the right way, you'll learn how to buy property without going to banks. And I have never borrowed money from a bank ever to buy a house. I've always found another way, and there's other ways, and I'll teach them in the class we'll be teaching. But other ways, one's an investor, somebody else will put up some of the money. One is creative financing to find a seller who'll carry back a loan for you. And we'll talk about several ways to do it without going to the bank, and that's important to learn. That's part of the learning process here.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Is there any habits or daily routines or yoga or meditate or what's a day in the life of John look like?
I'm going to try to see if I can't see you better because I can't hear what you're saying, Rich. I can't understand your questions.
Hear me now? No.
I have a hard time understanding your questions. It's not coming through the speaker very well.
Right. Is there any habits or daily routines that you do? What is keep yourself in the mindset of investing, or it's just all natural now? It just kind of exudes from you?
A daily routine?
Yeah.
Well, every day's different. I can tell you that. I have 3 kids and 5 grandkids, so you never know what the day's going to bring. I try to get up and get some exercise every day because it makes my mind work better to get a little bit of exercise. And then depending on the market, if I was just starting, when I was just starting, I would talk to a number of people every day. I mean, I had a budget of how many people I wanted to talk to that day. And sometimes I was looking for people who had money, who had joint venture with me or lend me money. Some days I was looking for people who would sell property to me. Some days I had properties to rent. I remember one year I bought 12 or 13 houses the last day of the year from a builder. They're all brand new houses. They're all empty. And I woke up the next day, it was New Year's Day, and I had this thought. I've got 12 empty houses. 12 empty houses. And so I knew what I was going to do for a while. I was going to go out and find tenants for those 12 houses. So you do what you need to do that day, and it changes from day to day. You should have a big picture goal. I mean, you should have a plan to, if your plan is to buy, and what I recommend in my book is to buy 1 house a year. And if you're in a really high price market, I mean, I have a number of students from the Bay Area. Their average house is up there $1.5 million now. So if you're in a market that's that expensive, you probably can't afford to buy a whole house when you're first starting. You're going to end up buying a piece of that house. And one way to buy a piece of it is to lease option the house where you have an option to buy it. it doesn't take nearly as much money to do that as it does to buy it with conventional financing, or you can buy it with owner financing. You look for a way to tie up the piece of the property that you can afford. And maybe you can't afford to have all the appreciation, so you only have an option to buy half interest or a third of it. And I've made all sorts of deals over the years where I would just end up with a small slice of the house, not the entire house. So every deal is a little different. And if you start thinking a little differently and not just traditionally, not just go to the bank and get a loan, but outside the box a little bit, there's a lot of ways to once you find somebody who needs to sell a house, and that's really a key part of this whole program, is the people we buy from really need to sell their house. We don't buy houses from people who just want to make a profit. We don't buy houses from people that don't need to sell. We wait for somebody who needs us, and those are the folks we buy from. And the same thing's true when you're dealing with investors. I like to deal with an investor who needs me to do all the things that they can't do or won't do. Um, so if you think about how an investor situation works, I find a deal, and that's the first step. I find the deal. I find a house that I can buy either with a good price or good terms, and it's a good house in a good neighborhood. Then I go out and start looking for money, and I can show the investor, potential investor, the whole deal, the price, the terms, the house, and then they can make a decision whether or not they want in based on their needs. And if they need something, if they need more cash flow, or if they need long-term capital gains, or sometimes they just want to buy real estate. They're tired of whatever else they've owned, insurance or stocks and some other kind of investments, and they know real estate's going to be a good investment for the next 10 or 20 years. So they just went into the deal, and it's a whole different conversation. I can go on for hours about putting deals together, but the person you invest with is very important, and the way you structure the deal. So all the incentives on the right place are very important. And of course, the way you write it down is important. You want to make sure that at the end of the day that you get paid, so a lot of details there.
Yeah, how about, I feel like you struggle a lot with getting new people to understand what you mean by somebody that needs you, like that has a problem, and that not necessarily just somebody that puts their house up on the MLS. How do you tell new people that? Like, what are they looking for?
Well, it might be somebody that puts their house on the MLS and just can't sell it. I've bought a number. I buy about half of my properties through realtors. About half of them are brokers or agents that bring me deals, and they bring me the deals they can't sell, or they bring me the deals that the sellers really need to get out of in a hurry, and they don't have time to sell them and solve the seller's problems. So the word I get out on the street in my town, and you should do the same thing in your town, is that when you buy something, you're not an emotional buyer. Uh, the price and the terms have to work, but you don't even talk about that. What you tell people is, look, we're looking for houses in this general area, okay, in this general price range, so they have some feel for what you're looking at. Otherwise, they'll bring you stuff you don't want to look at. If you want to buy a house in a $500,000 to $600,000 range, you don't want to look at $200,000 houses. You don't want to look at $2 million houses. You want to look at houses in that price range. So I identify certain neighborhoods, and I know all the prices in those neighborhoods. And I say I want to buy in that neighborhood, and I'm looking for somebody who needs to sell and close in a hurry. Okay, they can't wait for an MLS sale. They can't wait for something to sit on the market for 2 months and then take another month or two to close. Now markets change. There was a time, and it's just about over, where people put things on the market and they get multiple offers. Well, we're not seeing nearly as much as we did a few years back. In fact, there's one house right in one of my neighborhoods. It was on the market for over 500 days. Well, if somebody's had a house on the market for 500 days, they're probably ready to sell. They're tired of, or if the house is sitting empty, they're tired of making payments and mowing the grass. So you're looking for somebody who's looking, who really needs to sell. And I always ask myself this question. I say, if I were these people, would I make somebody else a good deal? And if the answer is yes, and they're going to make somebody a good deal, it might as well be me, because I'm a nice guy, right? I will make them a deal that'll then somehow help them either save their credit, give them money to move, put them in another house they can afford. And I've done all those things. So you look for somebody who has a problem. And the last, last three houses I bought, two of them were empty. One of them was actually rented to somebody. Now, I don't like buying houses that are because generally the problem is the tenant. And so now what you're doing is you're buying a house with a bad tenant. And I can solve that problem. It's just, it's just more work. And we nursed that tenant along for about 6 months and finally got rid of them in the last house we bought. But the other two houses were houses that were sitting empty. They'd been empty for a long time. They had both been rehabbed, so they were in good shape. And one point I'd like to make tonight is I don't like buying houses that I have to do a major rehab on. I don't care if I have to paint it, put a roof on it, and do some flooring and that kind of thing. But I don't have to put all new kitchens and bathrooms and windows and air units. And I don't want to spend 50 or 100 grand on getting a house ready to rent. It just doesn't make any sense. I want to buy a house that somebody else has already done that to. Yeah, I want to buy a house that's in pretty good shape. And again, I don't mind doing some things to it. These last two houses I bought were in really nice shape. People have done really nice rehabs on them, and they've gone off and bought other houses. So there was an extra house, and it was a house that was empty. They didn't want to rent them. They were having trouble making payments. So of course the price and the terms got better. So you look for people to have a problem, and then you learn to make offers that solve their problems, but leave you a really good chance of making a profit. Something you can afford.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you nailed it, that you're looking for a problem. And just because it's on the MLS and it's for sale doesn't mean they have a problem. And even then, I have a neighbor that's had his house listed for 312 days or something now. And I still call him, he's like, call me again in 6 months. It's like, you call me when you're ready. So, can you hear me okay now?
I'm working at it. It's funny. I mean, it's kind of echoing, so I'm having a hard time.
I'm going to leave my mic off because I think I'm just echoing with our, so hopefully you can hear me better.
Just remember to yell at the ceiling.
Yeah. It's pointing away from me, unfortunately.
I can hear people that are not in a big room.
So, I wanted just for the more experienced people, looking back, is there a mindset change or something you wish you would have changed earlier in your strategy? That you'd be more ahead now, or I don't know if that question makes sense.
When I first started, I was fresh out of college. I'd always been I thought I was going to make money in the stock market. So I've been charting the stock market for years, and I was trying to figure out how I could make $1 million in a hurry. I always wanted to have $1 million. Sound like a good plan. So when I got in real estate, that kind of was my strategy too. I was trying to figure out how to go out and make $1 million on one deal. And what I learned the hard way was the people I was trying to buy property from, who already had $1 million property, was smarter than I was. I mean, this is not a genius idea, but you can figure this out. When you're trying to buy a big property, if it's a motel or a big piece of land or something from somebody else who already owns one, they may be smarter than you. So it's hard for you to always make a good deal doing that. And then the flip side of that is when you go to sell it, you're probably selling to somebody that's pretty smart. So I kind of transitioned into small deals instead of the big deals because of that. And because I've met so many people who tried to put big deals together all their lives, and they still didn't have money. They were broke. And I thought, that's not the plan. I don't want to be broke. I want to do something that I can do over and over again, repeat it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of houses, so the house business attracted me. And I started buying houses, and I bought a whole bunch of houses. And I encourage people not to be in a hurry. Sometimes you think you know what you're doing, and you're doing it wrong, and you don't figure out you're doing it wrong for a number of years. Anybody ever done that besides me? I bought a whole bunch of houses by giving people a 5-year note and telling them, I will pay you your purchase price for your equity. I generally take over their loan, give them a note for their equity, and I told them I would pay them in 5 years. Well, that was interesting because I bought about 20 houses like that. And the 5 years went by, all 20 notes came due the same year. It was exciting. And it's tempting to do that right now because you can buy houses from people who have equity and they can't sell for some reason. They'll take a note. But 5 years goes by fairly fast. It didn't seem like it. When you're in your 20s, 5 years sounds like forever, but it goes by, and you don't know what the market's going to be like in 5 years. So I've got this rule in my book, 10, 10, 10, and the 110 stands for don't ever finance anything for less than 10 years. And the other two tens are don't put more than 10% down and don't pay more than 10% interest. And people have been kidding about the 10% interest for a couple of years, but now if you look around, a lot of people, especially flippers, are paying a lot more than 10% interest, and that eats up a lot of your profit. You're transferring a lot of your profit to your lender. I'm a lender, and I haven't been lending recently because we're close to the top of the market. Things are flattening out and taking longer to sell. So the people who are trying to flip right now are struggling a little bit. And I don't want to get caught at the top of the market with a bunch of loans out like I did last time. But I'm an aggressive lender when the market goes down. When prices drop, and our market dropped more than your market did. Our market dropped in half. We had houses that were worth $300,000 that sold for $140,000 3 months later. I mean, it was a tremendous drop. And so when they got down to 140, I became a lender again. Well, I wasn't a lender at 300, and I see the same thing today. I don't think we're going to have that kind of drop in prices because there's not much inventory. There's too many people that have really good loans. There's too many people that have free and clear houses. There's really no reason for them to ever wholesale their houses. So the lack of inventory is probably going to support this market, and that's the good news. So as a borrower, you kind of have to stay tuned into what's going on. And if you're new at this business, you probably haven't seen a market where the banks just quit lending to all investors. You couldn't get an investor loan. And when that happens, a lot of your competition disappears because that's all they know is going to the bank to borrow money. If you know another way to do it, when the banks stop lending money to investors and they tighten up on all loans, and that's starting to happen right now. I've got a number of friends in the banking business, and they're telling me that they're pretty much stopped making commercial loans because the big glut we have of commercial space, office space, apartment buildings are overbuilt now. So there's a lot of commercial loans that are going bad. And so if you're in the business where you want to borrow money on a big building, you've got a problem right now. The house business hasn't changed much, but if all the lenders have these loans go bad, it will affect the house lending business at some point. They'll have to pull in they'll tighten up on their
So
requirements.
when that happens, John, you see, I mean, last time I saw Bruce Norris talk, you think we're just going to go kind of sideways, for the next decade or so? Do you see the same thing, or do you think we go up or down?
Well, I didn't hear what you said. Bruce said. Bruce moved to my town. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Well, he said
I'm waiting for my can too.
the last time I saw him talk, he thought things were just going to kind of bump along sideways for a while. You see the same thing?
Well, I think there's a good chance of that. Back in the 80s, that's exactly what happened. We had a big run up in the 70s. Prices doubled in about 3 years, and then they got flat for about 6 or 7 years because interest rates moderated. They were in the 8 to 9 range and just held there. And there just wasn't much incentive for people to buy houses because houses weren't going up in value. Today, we're seeing that the rents really it's cheaper to rent a house than it is to buy a house for a lot of people. And because of that, the market, there's not a lot of volume in the market. The rental market is actually stronger in the house business than the sale market is at this point. Inflation and the government are the wild card. You just don't know what the government's going to do. But every time they turn around, they seem to write a check for another $1 trillion. And when they keep doing that, it increases the money supply, which makes everything pricier. It doesn't make it more valuable. The loaf of bread that used to cost $1 is now $3. It's not, it's the same loaf of bread. It's just the money has changed.
Yeah.
If you're in the housing business, if you're in the housing business and you use leverage wisely, inflation is your friend. You make a lot of money with inflation if you have leverage and you buy an asset that goes up with inflation. So that's one thing we've done for years. We're still doing exactly what we did 40 years ago, and that is we buy the best quality properties we can, and we hold on to them as long as we can. But we're really focused on long-term wealth building, and that's something that especially people new to the business need to think more about. Short-term cash flow is good. You need to eat. You need to have a place to live. Although because of when I first started, I rented a house. For 10 years, our first 10 years in this business, we rented the house we lived in. We did not buy a house. And the reason for that is I knew that if I bought a house, I'd end up putting a whole bunch of money in that house. Maybe you buy the house with a low down payment, but then you have to fix it up and buy furniture and you do everything else you do with the house. And the house I live in now, we bought in 1982 with a good deal. I can tell you, we've spent 4 times as much fixing this house stuff as we paid for it. So you end up putting a lot more money in a house once you buy it. But if you're just starting and you don't buy a house for a while, and you use whatever cash flow you have to buy some kind of investment, get in some investment that'll go up in value one day, and it took us about 10 years, but after about 10 years, we could then afford to pay cash for a house. And we waited for the right market, and we bought a house for cash at a good price in the right market. And once you get in that position, then you're gold. Now you've got a house you live in that's free and clear. Your overhead's lower, and you always have that to go back to if anything else goes wrong. And you can go on and take risk as you buy more investment properties. You take your risk on the investment side, not on the personal side. You don't risk the house you live in. You don't take personal risks.
Yeah, I hear you on the upgrades. Every house, I've moved and house hacked every year or two for the last 5 years. And every single one I've lived in, I want to start putting more money into. We were just talking about redoing our kitchen a week ago. So we got to move before we start putting money into it.
Well, the other thing is you can be a serial house seller, and I've got several friends, and I'm sure you all know people who've done this too. They'll buy a house and they'll wait till they have a $500,000 profit and they'll sell it. And they'll buy another house and wait till they have a $500,000 profit and they'll sell it. And they've done it 4 or 5 times. And that's tax-free money if you don't mind moving every 4 or 5 years. We're never moving. I've been here most of my life. I'm not going anywhere. So we're not going to use Section 121, but that's $500,000 tax-free money. My kids just sold a house. They made money doing it. They don't pay a dime in taxes on it. So that's a smart thing to do. Another thing I figured out over time is not the house that's going up in value. In most cases, it's the land that's going up in value. So I started focusing more on buying really good lots and not paying as much attention to the house. And some people get this wrong when they think about buying a better house, they buy an expensive house. Well, you don't want to buy a great big house on a small lot. You want to really turn that inside out and buy a relatively smaller house, which is easier to maintain, but still rents on a better piece of land. Because over time, it's the land that appreciates. The house actually wears out, becomes obsolete at some point. We have a house we're going to sell right now, and when the people buy it, they're just going to bulldoze it, I'm sure. And it's a house we've owned for 30 or 40 years, and it's been rented for 30 or 40 years, but it's an original house. It was built back in the 60s, and it's just obsolete now. So whoever buys that property, and then the lot has much more value than the house, they're going to tear the house down and build a brand new house there. The last couple of houses I bought for less than land value. So the house came for free because I was buying a lot and it had a house on it and the houses were in decent shape, but I was focusing on buying that lot. So when you go out to a subdivision and you start looking at properties to buy, pay attention to the lot as much as you do the house, because there's some good lots and bad lots in every subdivision. I've done some subdividing, and I can tell you that if we had 50 lots in a subdivision, there were some of them we just had a hard time selling. And they're generally the ones on a busy corner. They're ones that people just naturally don't want just because common sense tells them that's not a great lot. So make sure you're buying a good lot. And of course, the better the area you can buy in, the fewer you have to have. If you're buying houses in Newport Beach, you don't need a whole bunch. You probably just need half of one. But I'm serious. You don't have to buy the whole house to start with. And if you're in an area of expensive houses, you're really in better shape because you don't have to buy as many. You don't need to buy 10 or 20 houses. You buy 3 or 4 in most neighborhoods and do just fine. In fact, I was with a friend of mine yesterday who has 2 houses, and the income from those 2 houses supports them really well. They're paid for now. He just retired. He's 62 years old, and just 2 houses did him. So you don't really, when you go to set goals, you have to use, not get too excited about buying a whole bunch of properties. You make it do it. The fewer properties you can make it work with, the better off you're going to be. The happier you're going to be, the less you'll work, the less risk you'll have.
Yeah.
Another thing I learned is it's hard to fix a neighborhood. Sometimes you buy a house that has a bad neighbor next door. That can be a real problem. And sometimes it's not as bad as you think. You go talk to the people and they're okay people, but every once in a while you get a wild card and they're really bad news. And it's really, and unless you're going to buy that house too, which will be expensive, it's a bad situation. So I always tell people, when we buy houses, we walk around, we check out the neighbors, we check the back fence neighbors, we look around the block. We go out there 2 or 3 times to make sure that there's a bad dog or a bad neighbor that we find out before we buy that house. Because it's hard to fix a bad neighborhood. It's hard to fix a bad neighbor. I bought one house and the guy next door had just sold his marina. And when he sold the marina, he brought everything from the marina to his house. He brought the great big forklift that he used to pull the boats out of the water to his house. So he had this big forklift and he just had boats. He had all sorts of stuff. So I went over and met him. He said, "I bet you don't like me." I said, "Well, I don't know. Tell me more about yourself." I sold the marina. He said, "But the good news is I'm going to sell this house." And I said, "That's good news." And he did. And I went over there one day and he had this great big forklift and he was just taking a whole bunch of stuff and loading it right in the back of the garbage truck. So, sometimes the people are nice and they're just junk collectors. And, we've had several hoarders live in our houses. That's okay. Where's a hoarder going to move? They're going to stay there until it's done. They're lifetime residents when they're hoarders. So it's kind of funny who you'll run into here. I bought some properties in the path of progress because I thought progress would show up. And I still drive by some of those properties, and it's been 40 years, and progress isn't there yet. Yeah, it's a mistake to buy something that where you hope you're going to get lucky and somebody will pay you more money for it. You buy something that you can rent today to a real tenant, to decent people that'll stay there for a while and make you some money, and the numbers will work out. The income, somehow you can make the income and expenses work out where you can afford to hold on to that house.
John brought up a good point. I've had people tell me before, like, there's this new company coming into town, or whatever. They're going to be redoing these nuclear silos or whatever. It's going to bring business for the next 10 years in this town, and they're going to invest in that town now because of that. It sounds like that wouldn't really qualify as a good investment for you.
Well, I just wouldn't pay much attention to it, because some of that stuff works, some of them doesn't. I'd rather have, in most towns, there's real people who live in real neighborhoods, and they wouldn't get as excited about that kind of news as speculators would. So, we live in a boom and bust town here. We live in a coastal town in Florida, and there's years where you can't give a house away, and then there's years where you can't buy a house. So it kind of comes and goes. But I don't pay attention to the news as much as I pay attention to my tenants and see how they're doing. One day a month is really important to me, and that's the day that everybody pays their rent. We had the first day of the month come around. All my rents are due the first. So the first day of the month comes around, and only half the people pay the rent. I know something's going on. I don't have to read the paper that day. I know something's going on. So you need to be tuned into your marketplace. And of course, I'm always talking to people who have houses for sale. So I'm testing the market all the time. But I'm not buying the whole market, am I? I'm not buying the real estate market. I'm buying a particular house in a particular neighborhood that I want to own. And I know what my parameters are. I know that I'll pay cash for it if the price is right, or if the terms are right, I'll buy it with owner financing. So, I'm real focused on what I'm doing. And the news doesn't have as much to do with my operation, because I figure things will come and go. There'll be, you read the newspaper, one day it'll say the world's about the end, and then the next day say, well, not this year though, it's better now, and things are better all of a sudden. So you can't get too focused on what people are trying to tell you in the newspaper.
Absolutely. We got one more question, and then we'll open up to the audience here for a couple.
Okay.
If you were going to start over, you had all your knowledge that you have now, but whatever happens in life, and you were starting from zero, what would be the first thing you would do?
I do the same thing I did last time. I go look for somebody who had an empty house that didn't want it anymore, that needed to get rid of it, and then I'd make them an offer, and then I have to go out and try to find the money for it, because I didn't have any money. So when I made somebody an offer and they say, well, we have to have $10,000 to leave town, I said, okay, I'll pay you $10,000 if I can find it. If I can't find it, we just won't close. And that's okay. So, I make the offer, and then if I didn't have the $10,000, I go find somebody who had the $10,000, and I give them a piece of the deal. I'd say, I'll cut you in for half, but you put up the money, I'll do all the work, and we'll split the profits when we sell it. So I would do the same thing. There's never any shortage of money out there. People get too hung up on the money side. If you find somebody who needs to sell their house, and they'll sell it to you at a price or on terms that almost guarantee you a profit, then you can find the money for that deal. You can talk to folks in your investment group. There's bound to be somebody in there that's got money in the checkbook to write you a check for a part interest in a deal like that.
Yeah.
But you have to find a deal first. You can't find somebody and say, well, give me money if I find a deal. They don't know if you can find it, what a deal is. You've got to show them the deal, show them the real numbers. But you can do that. And I've taught classes for years, and in a class, sometimes we go out and knock on doors and find houses. There's always a house that's sitting empty somewhere that needs help. And it's just your job to first identify where you want to buy, so you don't buy the wrong property. Don't do what I did. Don't buy property that you don't want to manage. Make sure you want to manage it. So look around and see who else lives in that neighborhood, because whoever you rent to is going to look like everybody else that lives in that neighborhood. They're going to have the same kind of job, same kind of kids, same kind of cars. So just use some common sense and make sure that you want to manage that particular property. And then when you find somebody who has that problem and they need to sell in a hurry for some reason, make them an offer. Make them an offer. And if they don't take the offer, come back next week and make them another offer. Don't let them get away if they really need to sell that house, because at some point they will sell that house.
That's great advice. Great advice. Thank you. We're going to open it up to questions. So if you want to just raise your hand, and everybody on Zoom too, if you want to just use the raise your hand function. We'll just kind of switch back between the room and on Zoom. Yes, sir.
Hey, John. How you doing? My name is Ryan. I am really kind of shied away from residential in California because my biggest concern and my biggest fear is the changing laws that are always favoring tenants over landlords. Is that any kind of concern for you, or am I just overthinking it?
Well, it's a concern, but the laws that continue to change, depends on who's in charge, right? When the government changes from one side to the other, the laws tend to change a little bit with them. And what's happened in California, especially, you're much more aware of this than I am, is they've kind of gone too far one way. Now they're backing off a little bit as far as being arrested for shoplifting, that kind of stuff. As far as tenant laws, the law that they recently passed on rent controls, I think is going to have an unintended consequence of people raising their rents more often. If you tell me I can only raise my rents 10% a year, what am I going to do? I'm going to raise my rents 10% a year. And I understand the law is 5% plus for living in your county, but there's a maximum of 10. But that gives people a reason to raise rents on a regular basis. I can tell you over the last, as long as I've been in business, our average rent increase per year has been 5%. Our average 5%. So if I could raise my rents 10% every year, I'd be way ahead of the game. And that's not. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think people are going to do that. So the short answer to your question is, there's still going to be money made in this business. And if you look around, you'll see people who have a lot of money in your town, a lot of money in your state. They own a lot of real estate. And because they own a lot of real estate, they have some influence over what the government does. And if it gets too far out of whack, there'll be a reaction to that, and they'll bring it back toward the middle a little bit. But I'll tell you, rent controls don't seem to hurt prices, and they don't seem to hurt the amount of income you get. Now, there's some other rules about how you can select tenants, and I think just learning how to be a good manager and learning how, when you manage, people talk about managing real estate, and that's really a misnomer. You're really managing the tenants who live there. Managing a house is easy. If the roof leaks, you call a roofer, they fix it, right? But if you have a tenant there that's not paying the rent, now you've got to talk to a real life on the other side and figure out how to deal with that. So you have to stay on top of your laws. But if you have decent properties and when you rent them, they're in good shape, and then you're particular about who you rent to, you're looking for somebody who can afford the property and who wants to live there for some reason, and you interview several people perhaps you'll find the right person to rent that house who thinks like you do, who probably not crazy about some of the government rules that are coming down, because in the long run, the unintended consequence of these rent control rules is they're gonna hurt tenants. It's gonna cost more money to rent properties, and you know, when they pass a law, you just have to sit down and think, okay, if that's affecting me, what do I need to do to work around it?
Got it. Thank you.
Chen?
Hi, John.
Hi.
Earlier you said about the key to real estate is finding a good quality lot. And can you share some of your checklist of what's a good quality lot or the bad ones?
Well, good quality lot's a lot in a neighborhood that I think is going to appreciate, you know, where people want to live, in a good part of town, where probably maybe there's some restrictions about developing more. The new properties being built in my town are being built on smaller and smaller lots. We're kind of taking a page out of the California book, and now they're building on 40-foot lots on a regular basis. Most of my lots are 60 or 70 feet wide. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit deeper, and people like the little larger lot. You just have a better yard. So that's a basic thing, but it comes down to neighborhoods, really. I look at neighborhoods in my town where people really like to live. There's some neighborhoods that are very attractive to folks. You know, when a house comes up on the market, it sells pretty fast because people want to live in that part of town for some reason. And I focus on buying in that part of town because I know that it'll probably always be desirable, and it is always desirable to go up in value more. And as far as a lot itself, I mean, you know, you have to use local knowledge now. If it's sitting on the side of a hill and the hill's moving, bad lot. You know, if there's reasons that I can't give you a list of things to look for in your town, but you should get to know, you know, partner up with somebody who's been buying property in town for a while and ask them that question and then find out if there's any particular soil condition or you know, elevation or whatever it is that would not be good in your town, and don't buy that.
Got it.
You're
So you would
California, like lots that have double access, either with like an alley behind it or corner or something where you have multiple ADU entries. Those are going to be more valuable.
Wait, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that one more time?
You get over here on this side.
I said in California, especially right now, like lots that are ADU friendly, so you know, lots that aren't locked off by a house, have multiple entry, like an alley in the back, or a corner lot, something that you can get multiple units on and have access points where everyone just doesn't share the same driveway going up the side of the house. Are going to be worth a lot more, you know.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, if lot's big enough to build another unit on it, that's great.
so
I can hear you better over there, Red.
yeah, I guess you know, it's meant to pick up everything in front of it. It's weird.
Hey, John, what year did you graduate high school?
1966.
66. You're older than me.
I was a slow learner.
Why do you look younger than him?
You know, I can't answer that. You have to ask him.
Mary Ann, what do you got? Mary Ann, can you hear us?
Yes, I forgot to unmute. Hi, John. I'm Mary Ann Squares. I think I went to one of
Hi,
your meetings a while back with Peter. But anyway, I know there was a question about worrying about your tenants because of the laws. But what I found is checking out your tenants, how you screen them is what helps you. If you don't have problem tenants, you're not going to have problems, you know, having to evict something. So how do you screen your tenants? How do you just, you know, do you use a service? Do you meet them?
No, I do it myself. I manage all my own properties. I select, and I think the most important job of managing is selecting the right tenant to move into that house. So what I do is when I interview people, I spend a lot of time with them. And what I'll find is if you're a flake, you'll leave. At some point, you won't put up with it. And I'll keep asking questions, you know, and if you open the door, you know, or you make a mistake and don't tell the truth, then we're done. You can still not rent to somebody because they're lying to you. If they lie about where they work, how much money they make, where they used to live, did they pay the rent on time? I mean, there's certain things that you can catch them on. But I'll tell you, most of the people are good. You know, it's not like 3 out of 4 are bad. It's more like 5 out of 6 are good. You just have to figure out which of those 5 out of 6 you want to rent to, but use some common sense. I don't like to rent to people unless they want to live in that neighborhood for some reason. So when I rent, I still put things online, but I put signs in the yard, and I want people to go drive by and look at that sign and look at that house and walk around that house because it'll be empty, and like it, even before we talk. And because then I make them pay me $100 application fee, which isn't much, but then fill out a detailed application, which takes a while, and the flakes don't like to do that. And then I sit down and talk to them, and literally sometimes an hour, and then if we don't get along, I want to not get along now before they move into the house. And, once they move in, we don't get along, and now we got a problem. So I'm friendly, and I set aside a long time to sit down and talk to these people. And most of the time, every once in a while, somebody will just get up and leave and say, "This is too tough for me." And I say, "I understand. We're just part friends now." But most of the time, people appreciate that, and then they know what they're getting into, because I do have a set of rules. Once you move into my house, I've got a 6-page sheet of rules that you have to pay attention to, and if you don't do those things, it costs you money. And if they don't like that system, they can go rent from somebody else. And if you're going to be tough on them before they move in, not after they move in. But then after they move in, you want to communicate, keep an open line of communication in case something goes wrong, because things go wrong with good people sometimes. I learned a long time ago, the lovely thing about the internet for me, other than these nice meetings, is that I can communicate with my tenants without making telephone calls. We communicate with everybody via email. I want them to write down the problem or write down what they want to talk to me about, but I want that written record. And then I can respond in my own time. The problem with the communications today is everybody's looking for an instant response. And I don't want to respond instantly to my tenants. I want to think about it for a while. And if they have a problem, if they call and say, "We've got a broken pipe and it's leaking water," well, before I even return or get back to them by email, I'm going to find a plumber who will come out and fix that. And I'll be able to email back and say, "Well, there'll be somebody there tomorrow morning to fix the pipe." And that they love that response, but if you don't have a solution to their problem, there's really no reason to respond to them. And you don't want to talk to a real excited tenant. You don't want to talk to somebody who's got a real personal problem. Their personal problem is not my personal problem. We have a business relationship. If they can't pay the rent, we'll work out something, and we'll work out, maybe they can move pretty fast, and I'll give them some money back now rather than getting further in the hole.
Thank you, John.
It goes back to your question too about how to deal with this. The tougher you make it for people to put up those barriers, well, then you're going to get automatically the ones that are willing to go through.
That's brilliant. Smart.
Mr. Todd.
Yes.
John, how do you feel about yard maintenance?
I don't like it. I used to mow a lot of grass when I was a kid, and I gave that up years ago.
How do you leave your tenants?
I'm sorry. It's late here and I'm tired, so my bad humor doesn't go over sometimes. We don't take care of any yards. We make the tenants do all their own yard maintenance, but I don't really care too much about what it looks like. If they'll live in that house the way it looks and take care of keep it. We have grass that grows here in Florida. It rains a lot, but if we'll just keep it mowed so the neighbors don't get mad at me. I don't really care too much about the day-to-day maintenance of it. I do care about taking care of the inside of the house, so I don't go and inspect them, but one of my people will be in the house at least once a year. Air conditioner guy, plumber guy, electrician, painter, somebody. And when they get inside, I want a full report of what the house looks like on the inside, and I get that from them. But again, most people do a pretty good job of it. But if the yard dies, and it does sometimes, it'll probably come back when it starts raining. But if not, and whenever I go to sell that house, I'll probably put new grass down. It'll look pretty then. But people who live there typically are not real big on maintaining yards, in my experience.
And if you look at the mountains, everything just dies, so you don't have to worry about it. Just maintain the dirt. And they got to shovel their own snow, so it works great.
There you go.
All right, last question to Fernando on Zoom.
John froze.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Hey guys,
So, go ahead.
Good to see you, John. Can you elaborate a little bit on your rules for your tenants? Some of us were just introduced to David Tilney's strategies, and I'm wondering, if you do something similar to him.
Yeah, David's my student. David and I do a lot of things very, very much alike. So his paperwork and my paperwork is almost identical. He does a couple of things differently. I still require security deposits, and he's moved on to a different system for that. But in my town, it is a very common thing to pay a security deposit, and I get a large security deposit. I get 2 months rent for security, and that's another way really you help with your selection process. If people don't have any money, they don't get to move in. I probably have some of the largest deposits in my town, but my rent's not high. So there's a trade-off between, you can charge high rent if you let somebody move in for a very low deposit and take somebody who's marginal. They'll promise to pay you high rent. Now, they may not pay you high rent, but they'll promise to pay you high rent. We like to work the other side of it. We like to give somebody bargain rent, below market, but we require a very large deposit and first month's rent before they move in. And if they don't have that money, we no reason to talk any longer. And a lot of people who are trying to move into your house who you don't have the money, and they'll try to work you. They'll try to get into the house by paying part of the rent or part of the deposit, and you don't do that. If they don't have all the money, don't let them in. But the other thing I've done for years is I give people a discount for paying on time. Now, we also have a late fee built in, but we give people a $100 discount if they pay on or before the first of the month. If they pay a day late, they lose that $100. Some people, we have one guy who's paid late probably 9 out of 10 months the whole time he's been there for 6 years. He pays the extra $100. Plus, he pays a $25 a day late fee after the second day. So he ends up paying more rent, and it's a choice he makes. But everybody else pays on time. So we've got a lot of people who pay on time every month. And the reason they do that is they don't want me to raise their rent. They know they have a bargain rent. They know they're a little below the market. And I don't mean they're not $1,000 below the market. They're a couple $100 below the market. And a couple $100 to me is not a big deal, but to them it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So I'd rather have somebody in there at a rent where they value the house. They know they've got a good deal. I give them good response as a landlord, and that's a very important part of it. If somebody does have a plumbing problem, air conditioning problem, roof problem, whatever problem is, I solve that problem as soon as I can. It doesn't get cheaper if you let it go for a week or two, and you just aggravate the tar out of somebody if they don't have an air conditioner or hot water or the roof is leaking. So don't be that landlord. Be the landlord who if you're just starting at this, you need to meet some people who will do work for you, do the work that especially plumbers, have somebody who can go out there and solve a problem immediately. But I tell people that if you cause a problem, if you break a window, you have to pay to replace that window. If you stop up the plumbing, you have to pay to unstop the plumbing. So I've never gone into a house and unplugged the toilet in my life. I mean, that's just not what I do. I operate like a banker would. Bankers will go out and unstop toilets, right? So, if you're behind your payments, they don't come fix your house for you. So, I operate 9 to 5, 5 days a week. I do check emails. So if somebody has a true emergency, I'll try to solve it for them on a weekend. But if you're a landlord, the one day that most people call, what is the day?
Day before Thanksgiving.
Well, it could be, but it's Friday. Every Friday afternoon. That's the hot button. That's when people find something wrong with their house. Or the day that you send them a rent raise letter and say, we're going to raise your rent. They find something wrong that day too. So you just have to, you have to keep your sense of humor and recognize what's going on. But if somebody calls, my longest term tenant, 40-year tenant, called me and said, we'd like new carpet. I said, sure. What kind of carpet do you like? And I said, well, let me get a bid on it and we'll see how much your rent will go up. And he said, our rent will go up? I said, sure. So we can do anything you want to do. New kitchen, new baths, you just tell me what you want. And I'll tell you what the new rent will be. And, when they get that relationship, then they don't call you very often. It's a lot easier to fix up an empty house than it is a full house. So if you're ever going to fix them up, wait till they move out, fix them up then, and then the new people you rent to, you can charge a lot more rent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, John, I know it's been it's super late there for you. Definitely appreciate your time. Any closing thoughts for us?
No, I think it's going to be a fun year. I like years of change. I like years when things are going on, and certainly this is going to be one of those years. Interest rates are going to do something. We're going to have a new president at some point. I mean, who knows what's going to go on? But when there's a lot of turmoil and people are worried, if you're in the buying business, that's a good time to buy. But follow my advice. If you haven't read my book, read the book. Building Wealth One House at a Time. It's bestseller. It's really laid out well. You'll learn a lot from it. And especially if you're going to come to the class I teach, read it before you come. It'll help you a lot. Get the big picture. There's a lot of detail in that book. But be positive about making money long term. This is not a short term business. It's not a 6 month or 1 year business. It's a 10 or 20 or 30 year business. But you'll be amazed about how much money you can make in 10 or 20 or 30 years if you'll stick with it. And right, that's what I want to do is help you buy the right types of property and manage it well, because the people that don't last very long are the people that don't learn how to manage, or they rent to the wrong people, or they buy the wrong property, which attracts the wrong people. So doing it right the first time will just save you a lot of bumps and scratches, so that's what I'm here for. Is that I've been there, I've been beat up. I'm going to try to help you keep you from getting beat up. That's my plan.
Sounds like a good plan. I know we're all excited to see it. Thank you for joining us tonight. Let's get John.
I look forward to seeing you all.
Thanks, John.
See you in a couple weeks.
Okay.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And just a quick reminder, so John is coming out June 22nd to 23rd. Let me share this to Zoom here. So he's coming out June 22nd and 23rd. It's going to be 2 days. It'll be here, right here at the Fire Center. Again, we can only fit about 100 people in this room, okay? So 25 of those tickets are already gone. The early bird special is already gone. So what we're going to do for tonight, and tonight only, this is the last discount you're going to get other than the member discount that always is in place. Tonight only, if you use the code on there, code IEREIC, you'll still get that early bird discount. Okay, so you still get the extra $50 off. On top of your membership, for the members out there, you can get 15% off. It's like $130 off the general admission price. So it's almost $200 off if you buy it tonight. Okay? Again, 25 already gone, at least. We're only going to be 100 guys. So every arena in the country is going to be blasting this out to everybody in SoCal. So we are absolutely going to sell out. Last year with Heat, we sold 170 tickets to the Marriott. There's only 100 seats again here. Do the math. If you can't do that math, take my next calculator class.
Which was great.
Figure out. So, any questions about the class or? No? All right. Well, thanks for coming. That was a kind of started earlier, so we're going to end a little bit earlier. But feel free to hang out, have some more food, network. If you have any questions for me, come find me. All right? Thank you.